Steven, how you doing?
Doing great, Robbie.
Hey, you can always make more money, but you can't make more time. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
And we have to start out with, who the hell are you? So why don't you tell people who you are, give us a little pitch about your background, stuff that we might not find in social networks, your hobbies, stuff you like, and then tell us a bit about your business background and why you're here.
Sure. So I'm always a bit of a mystery to everybody that I meet. And the profile is this. I'm originally from Chicago. Started working in multifamily offices in the Chicagoland area, just coming out of university. And I've always had this fascination with the Latin American market. And I think just the culture and the people.
No, more details. Why? Why Latin America?
Always,
why not Singapore? Why not Africa? Why not India?
Such a great question. Nobody asked me that. Like, why LATAM? And actually it was because my family made a really smart decision when we were younger. We did pretty well. My father was an executive for an insurance company. But one of the things that they insisted on was that I would volunteer in the summers in northern Mexico. And I was young, 15, 16 years old, knew nothing about that culture. I mean, it was completely foreign to me. But I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the language. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the women. I mean, it was all of those parts of it that really appealed to me. And so when I had the opportunity to start working with groups in the United States that owned assets in a place like Mexico, I just jumped on that.
When you mean assets, are we talking apartments, real estate, or what are we talking?
Mostly, so this was about the mid-2000s. So it's like a lot of maquillas that were being set up in northern Mexico at that time to take advantage of the NAFTA trade treaty. And so they owned production facilities in that region. They also owned hotels in Central America as well. And I was put in a position where I was helping advise on those transactions only because I spoke Spanish.
And what specifically did you do? What was needed in the advisory? What was your job specifically?
Portfolio management. So I was helping manage their portfolio of assets. And it could be real estate in Chicago, it could be real estate in northern Mexico. But I was put in a position where I was helping to buy assets, sell those assets. And like I said, there was the cultural aspect of it that I just fell in love with.
And what are you doing? What are you exactly analyzing? Are you looking at property values? Are you looking at market tendencies? What are you doing to make decisions? How many assets do you have under your control or that you're responsible for?
At that time, it was probably $500 or $600 million.
Just a little bit of money.
I was really young. I was like ridiculously young. And of course, I had a lot of oversight, so I wouldn't do anything stupid. But at that time, it was a real interesting time because it was just before the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And so what happened was they were heavy into real estate in all the places that you don't want to own real estate in 2008, 2009. South Florida, Nevada, Arizona. And that was the next lesson in my life, was actually how to get through a recession. So when things get turned upside down, what do? And so I rode that out through the balance of the recession and then left. And I was like, I'm done. That's it. I'm going to go out on my own and just do Latin American advisory.
Oh, really? Yeah. Because you saw the opportunity or because you enjoyed it? And you said, if I'm going to be doing this, I might as well do it where I enjoy it?
Well, I could lie to you and say it was because of the opportunity, but it was totally because I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I absolutely loved
Awesome.
the aspect of like travel and getting to know people, and then all of a sudden going to a place like Chile where I didn't know anybody, and then having to build a network there and relationships and what's a pisco sour and all those like little nuances of the culture throughout Latin America, to me was fascinating.
And so where are you at now? And what do you do now?
So that was the start of the journey. And now I'm in a position where I still have my advisory business, but I've also developed my own investment thesis as well. So think of it as like two separate structures. Number one, I'm advising family offices.
Oh, awesome.
Private equity, United States, but then also in Latin America as well, who are maybe looking for opportunities to invest into in the US. And then we have our own portfolio of companies that we have been building as well.
So you have the understanding that if someone wants to go US LATAM or LATAM US, you can go, nice.
That's right.
And then the more information you gain from helping one, it just exponentially applies to the other. Because
That's right.
Okay.
That's
like
exactly
your own
right.
Rails system for...
That's
awesome.
right. And if I need capital for an investment that maybe we want to make, I tap into my clients because they're partners to us.
And so you have on your page all these investments you've done. Tell us about one of these done, and this is immersion, it's called?
Yep.
And what exactly, and what is that? Is that money you're advised or that money that you've invested?
Advised.
Okay.
I wish it was money that I invested, but no, those are advisory projects that I've done over the past decade or more, where there has been either a US or LATAM thesis to those transactions. And I've done transactions all over the region, from Mexico to Chile, including Brazil and beyond.
So now we get to the nitty-gritty, the questions.
Let's do it.
I like this question because it had me thinking about generational change. And then we have another piece here. I think someone was telling me that it's the first time ever we have 4 generations working in companies. You've got someone who's born on TikTok, and
Wow.
you've got and then you've got the older person. So you've got basically 4 generations existing in some companies right now. What is you seen as the evolution? And I want to know, besides, like, we have here, agriculture, real estate. How has the mindset changed, and how is it different now that you've seen over these generational changes?
It's such a fascinating time to look at family offices and generational wealth, because everything is changing, and it's changing quickly. So it's just, think of it as almost no movement for hundreds of years, where you had families who were, and I'm saying specifically in Latin America, who were maybe more agricultural focused, owned real estate, owned industry, and there was essentially no innovation beyond those assets.
What should innovation be? It doesn't grow naturally, or you need innovation to actually move it?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think it was more maybe just the mentality, and it could have been the access to information. I mean, we're talking 100 or so years ago, where a lot of these economies were developing, and so these were agricultural-based economies. But what ended up happening is that the innovation started to catch up pretty quickly. And so you started to see innovation in the financial markets, for example, 40 or 50 years ago in a place like Colombia or Brazil 30 years ago. And then the connection between Mexico and the United States in the past 30 years, tax treaties, that has really started to speed up innovation with a lot of these families. And so now what's happening is now you add in technological innovation of the past 10 years, and it's like everything is being sped up, and now you have multi-generations that are coexisting together, to your point, with maybe totally different mentalities on what to do and how to grow.
But when you say innovation, Stephen, in the family offices or family businesses, it's innovation in the business structure. It's innovation in how they run different parts of their business. It's innovation in maybe they hire a CEO to run it instead of a family member. What do you mean by innovation in a family business?
I think it's more about the innovation from the business structure standpoint. So it could be how they run the company, the services that they're offering. So maybe now it's more of a technological-based solution versus what was 20 years ago was maybe a little bit more of a standardized offering. So what happened is that it took a long time for these family offices to start innovating the way that they operate their companies. But over the past 20 years, the innovation is starting to catch up, and it's almost like it's increasing, exponentially.
So what's the problem? What's the advantage? I mean, I don't have any idea the number of the capita of how many family offices, how much money they're generating, and how many of their kids they're actually having, and how many kids actually want to be part of the business. And if they don't want to be part of the business, what percentage is that, and what advantage is that for people in the market who want to take over a business like that or see an opportunity when one's in decline? They're like, all right, run your family business to the ground, live off your dividends, but I'm going to eat this part of the market. What have you seen that people need to do, or how to think about it?
Well, Robbie, you're touched on 2 or 3 points that it's like hard to unpack because it's so big. Like it's massive. You talk about family offices in a place like here. We're in Cali, Colombia, Valle de Cauca. They own everything. I mean, industries and agricultural land, and now they're making VC investments, and it's that they own, in many cases, they own these countries. And now we're in a position where these families are in their second, or in most cases, their third generation, where the third generation wants nothing to do with that family business.
But why?
I think to them, you look here at this event at the Capital Summit, you see a lot of startups. And some of these startups are coming from those families. Because to them, it's almost more appealing to be in venture capital, have their own startup, their own business.
Do their own thing. You showed me how to do it. I need to do it too.
Do your own thing versus working in what was historically the family business. And to them, it's stale, it's old, it's not new.
So do you think there's a market or someone, I don't know if it's already built, basically like a, like you have operators that run thousands of hotels and they're hotel operators. They're going to run family businesses and you just contract out to run the family business and then they grow it? Or what's going to happen to a family business when there's no one there that wants to take it over? Do they just sell it off, sell the assets, sell the business, sell the clients?
Sell the assets is probably the quick answer to that. But you look at, for example, in the United States, where there's more of a sophisticated approach to these family office type of businesses. And some of them have that same approach in Latin America, but what's happening is that a lot of these families, there's no succession plan in place in Latin America. So I've had this happen to me where all of a sudden the patriarch gets ill and the son and daughter are in their mid-30s. One's living in Miami, the other one's becoming a future reggaeton star or something like that. And they contact me because they're looking at the assets and they say, I don't know what the hell to do. What do we do with this? Now, in my mind, I think there's a huge opportunity here because
the kids are contacting you.
The kids are contacting
because the patriarch
me.
is saying, help, I want to take over the business because they never had the conversation before about what to do.
Exactly.
The kids never said, I don't want to have anything to do with this, but I want the money. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they're in a position now where they're like, okay, shit, we're screwed. And now what do we do? Do we sell these assets? I don't want to run the company from Madrid. What's going to happen? For me, that's a huge opportunity because
I bet for you.
These are massive companies that, once again, own industry sectors in these countries. And if you can create an operational ecosystem or an efficient system to operate these companies, it could lead to a massive opportunity to then sell to other investors once you scale them and grow.
So you think they need to scale them beforehand? They just can't sell them as they are? You think it's more opportunity? Like, well, I mean, that's what equity, like take a business, make it better, bring in someone else, get it to a certain point, and then get it out of there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some of these businesses, maybe they have some risk applied to them usually where it could be that they're the only provider of paper products in a country like Colombia. Well, maybe you have 3 customers that you've been servicing for 50 years. Well, that is inherently risky to an outside investor like us. We look at that as customer concentration risk, or maybe they're not in another country. But this is a problem, Robbie, that's happening throughout all of Latin America. So if you could diversify through industries, through countries in a region like LATAM, you can own industry sectors multinationally.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, I'm not a social person. I mean, I like humanity, I love people. I don't like individual people that much, but humanity as a whole I'm pretty fond of. It's easy to understand the monetary side and say, but have you had successes where someone has asked you, hey, what do I do? And you say, okay, first we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Then outside investors or investors within the country purchased it? And what was the impact within that actual country when it shifts from a family-owned business to another one? Is it better for everybody where there's more jobs because it's growing? Is it bad because maybe someone in China is actually buying the investment, so now Colombia doesn't own what they used to own? What are the pros and cons of doing this, and how do you look at it from your point?
That's a great perspective because I've seen both sides of this, where it could be that an investor comes in and they could strip the company. Maybe it's to buy some type of asset within the company itself. Maybe it's to buy intellectual property, and then they're out. And that could leave a workforce essentially totally unemployed. And especially in a place like Latin America, that's really challenging.
When it could be a whole entire town that depends on one.
Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. Or it could be private equity that very similarly goes in and strips the company, takes the assets, and then fires management and all that. I've also seen the other side of this, where let's say it's the groups that have the right mindset that are looking at the region from the perspective of the potential of the region to consolidate industries and to grow it and to service a market like the United States, Canada, or Europe through production, through nearshore services, which is booming in a place like Colombia. And I've seen that actually increase the capacity for employment, and it's almost like an impact investment for some of these investors because they're actually providing more opportunities.
So the last question to put the nail in the coffin on this one is, I've never thought about this until I started reading these and started thinking about the questions. I imagine this is a very small space where very few people go deep and actually think about it. They're more in the actions. They're not really thinking about the other factors. Why is it important to you? Why is it important for anybody listening to this to actually understand, besides what's happening in your own ecosystem, why do you think it's important beyond the actual opportunity? Why are you so obsessed with this?
I think it's a question that I have been putting in my mind recently because of the macroeconomic conditions in Latin America right now that trouble me. And it makes me worry to a certain extent about the future of Latin America. Because you've had high inflation that was driven by the pandemic. You've had 10 years of a currency crisis that has played out almost in every country in Latin America, especially the major economies. You've had populist movements. You've had protests in places like Colombia, Brazil, Mexico. And at the same time, you've had some family offices locally who have been really funding a lot of these countries through industry and through opportunity are now leaving. Corporate debt levels are at all-time highs. So the question I keep asking myself is, who is going to finance Latin America?
The family businesses.
The family businesses.
And if there's no people to run them,
that's it.
Shit.
There's no money to fund those businesses. But at the same time, this is where I become optimistic. At the same time, you've had repositioning of supply chains from Asia into the Americas, and that has increased. We're now starting to see it come out in the numbers.
Say that again?
Supply chain movement from Asia into Latin America. So they're
imports.
So exports from Latin America into the United States. So they're saying that within a couple of years, it'll be $70 billion worth of projects that will come into LATAM to export to the US, Canada, and Europe. So that in itself is encouraging because that means that foreign investment is going to see this opportunity. And the other one that I see is innovation. I see services being super interesting. We have a platform where we export human resource capital from LATAM into the United States. And these are hard workers who are super educated, excited to work. And so there's something to that. And I see AI revolution in Latin America as being a part of that. But at the same time, I'm also a little cautious because there's some real big challenges out there too.
So you're not speculating or thinking about anything. You're just analyzing, this is where we're at this moment.
Correct, but I'm optimistic.
Okay. There's only one way to be in your market.
You have to be.
Yeah. You only have to be right once.
That's right.
And the pessimist is right every single time until they're wrong.
Exactly.
How are investment priorities changing in the ecosystem, in generational startups, and what kind of startups are receiving the most attention?
What's interesting is that I think LATAM is a little bit behind maybe a country like the United States and especially Europe, where they value the older generations and their insights and their experience. I think there's a disconnect that I see in LATAM, where I see some of the most successful startups really don't have that older advisory committee of who I like to call gray hairs. Every company needs...
Or bald guys.
Or bald guys, absolutely. We all need them. I have them. They're essential to helping you develop the right strategy and understand where risk may lie in your business because they've been through that before. And I think LATAM is just a little bit behind, whereas these other countries, they value that expertise more. And what I would love to see is I'd love to see more mentorship happening, or a focus or a value of mentorship in the Latin American market towards those older generations.
Does it exist in the United States like that, or no?
It is. Like, you see some of the startups like that I run across. Maybe they're trying to raise institutional backed capital, Series B, Series C. I think they put more of an emphasis on having older advisors sitting on their board of directors, on their executive management team. Whereas here, I don't see that. I see the 30-somethings that are operating these startups, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but also I wonder who else is giving them advice, that consejo. Like, where's that coming from?
I'm going to give you a little bit of a touchy question, just because where it comes from. It's an Elon Musk kind of topic, and I think someone was talking about diversity and Twitter, and he responded, okay, so you think you think an NBA team should hire or contract to play point guard a 4-foot Asian woman just because they have diversity? Like, it doesn't make sense. And so I started thinking about that, and it's like, I have on my podcast older people and younger people with purpose, because I see shit I never would have imagined, and I have now part of it. I have to go and find these older people because the knowledge they have is so different.
Yep.
And then young people see things so different that I have to move between both worlds. So you have diversity and generational age, which is a superpower.
Yes.
But then I think in terms of whether it's a woman, male, anything, you should hire based on their capacity and what type of market and what type of business you're in.
Yep.
Well, how do you think of diversity, generational diversity, and what you've seen the most successful companies? Is it okay to have all 7 people on your team, or do you think you need to have a diversity in your team, or does it depend on your market and what you're doing?
Well, I think there was a statistic that said that the most successful companies, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, they usually promote diversity at the top. So that there's usually diversity within the board of directors.
Or the board, the president of the team,
exactly.
who owns the team.
Executive management. Gotcha. And that's where you typically see more success. And I think there's...
and that's hardly anything in LATAM.
Right.
Diversity at the top. There's a lot of diversity in the middle, but not,
right.
in terms of male, female, and other.
Well, and I've seen it. I've seen it in both directions. I think Colombia is doing a better job where you're starting to see more female leadership on startups and early stage companies, where you've seen other countries, which I won't name, but it's typically male driven, and you go into a meeting with founders and it's all men. But the more successful companies have that type of diversity. And I think another thing to consider is that a lot of these startups are trying to upend traditional businesses. But those who operated traditional businesses are 30 or 40 years older than those startups. Well, what's the wealth of knowledge that comes from those older people that could impact that startup's ability to scale, to grow, to monetize? I think it's just so critical to have that perspective of people who have led industry sectors before.
You should speak to Andres Gutierrez. I don't know if you've ever met him. He has a company called Te Paga. He started Tapsi.
Oh, yeah.
Well, one of the questions he wanted to talk about is, he says, as a way to grow for a startup, startups need to start looking way more towards corporate help, like corporate investment. It's not like, oh, it's us against them. He says now is the time to use corporate knowledge, corporate thing to say, hey, look what I can do for your business. Help me scale. It's exactly what you said.
It's like having a strategic partner from day one who can help you take
grow,
whatever it is, grow, take market share, expand internationally, take risk. It makes so much sense. And I think, one of the messages I would give to a startup is to be thinking about that, to be thinking about the impact or the value of diversity of thought, of diversity of experience, and incorporating that into your strategic growth plan to give you access to new opportunities.
So I have 2 questions. One question just because it's really interesting, because I think it's a good one, and then we'll end with one. What role do digital platforms and social networks play in the way new generations can build or start startups? And I'll give you one example of a crazy guy his name is Borja, and he has a crypto company in Argentina. And he said something it was incredible. He says, young people today switch who their boyfriend or girlfriend is in a week. I mean, week after 2 weeks later, they have a different couple. How do you think they're going to switch to an app?
Yep.
If that's how they do with their sexual or their partner, what are they going to do with an app? And he
Yep.
says, and so from day one, they started building the community with loyalty, because that's what they invested in. The app was secondary to the loyalty in the community.
Yep.
And I was talking to another influencer about growing companies. He says the problem companies do is they think they put sponsorship and they put someone talking. No, you need a face. You need to build like a sound, and but there's so much power if you understand how to build your brand. Why did you think it was an important question to address? And does this go to family industries or everything in general?
I think this is just everything in general,
perfect.
which is cool. What I've seen, it's so fascinating because for some reason a lot of these founders fit the same profile. They're typically highly educated, late 20s, early 30s, and to your point, they're not looking to reinvent the wheel. What they're looking to do is take advantage of existing networks that are out there and develop niche services or niche products and market those products through those networks. So I've seen this. I've seen companies, great example, that grew from, it was a startup 3 years ago to becoming a $300 million company in about that same amount of time, and it was just because they found a niche product and they used Facebook and TikTok and they used all of those channels to really invest into their target market, but segmenting their target market into very specific groups and going after them. And so a lot of what you see now is that how can we use these existing networks to then exploit those to create a niche, and that to me is where
so
the
instead
opportunity
of
exists.
So you actually use the social network to build the niche that you're actually
Yes.
selling to.
Or they'll look at it, they're so intelligent, they'll look at it and they'll say, well, the world needs access to this. And then what they'll do is that they'll build out that product or that service and tailor it to that specific niche target. So I'll give you an example to make it a little more concrete.
And is it possible for a family office to do this?
No, it's not. So, that's why you need
That's
those.
why you hire an advisor?
Exactly,
Okay.
and you need that mixing of generations, the 20 and 30
Exactly,
year olds,
exactly.
to
Super, yeah.
provide that perspective. But I have
Okay.
this one founder that I work with in Australia. He's Peruvian, and he has created a niche market in the dental space where all they're doing is just marketing implants, but the full dental implants. And he has done it all through Meta, all through Instagram, and he's created this business that we're now accelerating to the point where we're looking at private equity funding, expanding internationally. It's just so brilliant.
And you started
that he
through
saw that
social
niche.
network.
Through social network.
Fuck.
I know, man.
Okay, last question to close with the future of Colombia. I asked a guy named Miguel McAllister who had Domicilios. He went IPO and after it got acquired, then he had Mercado, and I said, what do you see? Do you see the future of investment in Colombia as bright, or what do you see? And he says, no, I don't see it that bright, because he says what he sees as the problem is, he explained that I think not too long ago, some company in the United States was acquired for like $2.3 billion. No company in Latin America has enough money to buy a $1 billion company.
Yep.
So if you grow a unicorn in Colombia, no one has the money to buy it, and so the money has to go outside.
Yep.
So he says what we need is small exits, money in the market.
Yes.
Someone buying, growing your company 10x, but when then someone buying 20 million, 100 million,
Yep.
and then that money goes back in, and he says that's the way Colombia needs to grow. My last question is, what do you see as in the future of Latin America? Is it different in Colombia and all other places? Is it common? And how does the family office, or what we started with, fit into this entire picture?
Yeah, I think that the first point that we were discussing with this change of generations is really going to impact a lot of these countries, because you're talking about industry sectors, entire industry sectors that are owned by some of these families that are going to go to some buyer. Well, who is that buyer? It's not going to be local, to your point. I agree with that. I don't see a lot of those local buyers being there. But what I do see is I see an opportunity for international investment, foreign direct investment to come in and take those $20 to $100 million companies, consolidate them multinationally, and then flip those to private equity. I probably would disagree with that point of saying that there's no future for it. I do agree that there needs to be more smaller exits. but the opportunity for consolidation is really substantial in the Latin American market. And I'd say especially if you're servicing the US or Canada or Europe, where there's now tremendous amount of opportunity.
So what's the benefit if there's a lot of consolidation from outside money in Colombian businesses? How does that impact or does that improve? There's more money here because they have more skin in the game, so there's probably more capital that's going to come in for other startups. Is that what you think, or what's the benefit besides, or it's just growth for the country?
Yeah, I think there is, it's growth for the country, but then also having these exits is just going to feed the ecosystem more, so that you have more investment going into venture capital, which is going to seed more startups. And ultimately, what I'd love to see is I'd love to see more startups that are maybe a little bit more middle class, that are taking advantage of accessible private equity, or venture capital dollars and funding to seed their businesses. So yeah, it all starts with the exits, because if you don't have the exits, then where's that funding going to come from?
And the last one, if people want to contact you, send you a message, what's the best way where they can find you?
Please do, stephenmarks.me.
Okay, all right, thanks. And she's giving me the dirty look. Hey man, it was a pleasure, thanks so much.
Thanks, Robbie, appreciate the time.